Ever feel like AI models are like forgetful chefs? Sometimes they overcook their reasoning, and other times they serve up half-baked answers. But what if we could tell AI exactly how long to think? Enter L1, the first reasoning model with length-controlled policy optimization. Fancy words for smart thinking speed. L1 lets AI think just the right amount. Short for easy questions, long for tricky ones, all while saving compute. Let's dive in and see how it works.
First, why we even care about controlling how long a language model thinks. It turns out that when a model takes more time to reason, it often does better on complex problems. But there's a catch. Sometimes it rambles too long and wastes compute, or cuts itself off too soon and flubs the answer. We'd love to have a knob to dial in just the right amount of thinking, right? That's exactly where this new method, Length-Controlled Policy Optimization, LCPO, comes in. LCPO is a reinforcement learning approach that trains models to stick to a target reasoning length. The result is a family of models called L1, which can adjust their chain of thought based on your instructions. If you think about it, that means you can either save tokens when you want something quick, or allow a longer chain of thought when you need more accuracy. Check out Figure 1 here. You'll see how these L1 models outperform previous attempts at controlling reasoning length while staying accurate. There's another approach, called S1, that tries to insert special tokens to limit length. The problem is that it tanks performance. L1, on the other hand, adapts its chain of thought more naturally. This whole approach matters because a lot of big players, like OpenAI or DeepSeek, have shown that thinking longer tends to help models solve difficult tasks, but they can't really control how long they think. LCPO changes the game by optimizing for both accuracy and a target length, so we can avoid wasting tokens or running out of time just when we need that extra reasoning. So how does LCPO actually work its magic? It uses reinforcement learning to teach models to generate reasoning sequences that match a specific length, without sacrificing accuracy. There are two ways it can do this. One is called LCPO exact, where the model always generates exactly the target number of tokens in its chain of thought. The other is LCPO max, which gives the model the freedom to produce up to a certain number of tokens. Either way, the researchers applied LCPO to a 1.5 billion parameter language model, ending up with two versions called L1 exact and L1 max. Once trained, these models can handle a wide range of reasoning budgets. If you want a shorter, faster response, set the length low. Need a deeper analysis? Just allow more tokens. The coolest part is that L1 models keep their accuracy high no matter what length you set. In fact, under certain conditions, they can deliver up to 100% improvement in validation rates and 20% higher accuracy compared to older methods. This performance spike isn't limited to just math either. It shows up in logical puzzles and tasks like MMLU. They even turn out to be surprisingly effective at short chain-of-thought reasoning, sometimes giving better answers than much bigger models like GPT-4o when you hold them to the same computational budget. LCPO builds on the general observation that bigger models, or just letting your model generate more tokens, often leads to better reasoning. But those older strategies, like sampling more, refining iteratively, or branching out with trees, don't give you precise control over how many tokens get used. LCPO steps in to make that decision for you, finding the sweet spot between reasoning length and accuracy. You might be wondering, why hasn't there been more focus on controlling chain of thought length? A lot of work has looked at controlling output length in story writing or dialogue systems, but not much has been done with reasoning tasks. That's a bit odd, considering how important reasoning is. This paper closes that gap. It presents a reinforcement learning strategy specifically for reasoning models. Instead of slicing off the chain of thought at some arbitrary length, or forcing the model to insert tokens like wait or think, LCPO teaches the model to seamlessly adapt its reasoning to a length instruction. Want it to think for 20 tokens? Then that's exactly what it'll do. Or at least it'll try very hard, using the minimal tokens it needs to stay accurate. The trick is in how they train it. They take each example, prompt plus solution, and modify it with a length requirement. So instead of just feeding the model a question and an answer, they say something like, answer this in 15 tokens. Because the model sees loads of examples with different length instructions during training, it learns to scale up or down its chain of thought on the fly. The rest of this paper tests how well that works across a bunch of tasks, and whether it holds up without messing up the quality of the answers. So how do they actually train a model to balance accuracy and efficiency? This is where reinforcement learning shows up in full force. They define a reward function with two parts. The first part rewards the model for getting the answer right. The second part punishes it if it goes too far off the target length. If it nails the answer and stays on the dot lengthwise, that's maximum reward. If it's correct but spills over the token limit, it's still rewarded, just less so. You can tweak how much you punish length deviations to make the model care more or less about staying within its budget. That setup is how they train L1 exact, the model that always tries to match a specific token count. Then there's L1 max, which is a bit more lenient. It doesn't immediately slap the model with a penalty if it goes a bit past the limit, but it still encourages tight control. The goal is to let the model decide exactly how many tokens it needs, as long as it doesn't blow past the max limit. They test these models on a set of 40,000 reasoning questions that include both math and general reasoning. They also have some baseline models, like versions of DeepSeek's R1, so they can compare directly with a model tuned via LCPO. The main question is, do we get better results without letting the model ramble too much? Let's see. So does this length enforcement strategy actually deliver? The answer is a resounding yes. L1 exact and L1 max both do better at various reasoning lengths, all while keeping their token usage in check. Look at how they compare to S1, a model specifically built to control length. L1 is better across the board, sometimes by 100%. The reason is pretty straightforward. L1 adjusts how it reasons to fit the length, while S1 just chops off the chain of thought. Trimming a chain of thought halfway is bound to break the logic somewhere. Interestingly, L1 follows the same pattern as older models in one sense. The longer it thinks, the better it gets. But it's more token efficient, because it doesn't just keep pumping out more tokens, it uses those tokens more wisely. That means you get bigger performance gains for each additional token. They also compare L1 with AGENTICA 4K, which is the same base model but without strict length constraints. Sometimes L1 exact underperforms a bit on tasks needing lengthy derivations, but it more than makes up for it by not wasting tokens. Meanwhile, L1 max finds a sweet spot. It matches or beats baseline performance without using more tokens than it needs. Sometimes it even cuts the token count in half, which saves a ton of compute. Not too shabby, right? Now let's zoom in on how these models scale. If you give a model more tokens, it should do better. At least, that's the usual pattern. But can you still keep that control? According to the experiments? Absolutely. If you glance at figure 2 here, you'll see L1 exact and L1 max easily outperform other length-controlled models, achieving results on par with unconstrained models. This means you can hand L1 a tight budget or let it have a relaxed one, and it'll make good use of the tokens either way. What about new tasks that the model wasn't trained on? Does L1 still follow its length constraints there? The authors show that yes, it does, and it keeps up the same strong performance. On general reasoning tasks like GPQA or LSAT, L1's performance scales up as you give it more tokens, pretty much in a straight line. That's a good indicator that it's not just memorizing specific tasks, but truly learning how to reason under a given length. Another point they check is how faithfully L1 sticks to those length instructions. Turns out, it does a great job of hitting the target token count, or very close to it. That means you know exactly how many tokens you're going to spend, and the model won't start rambling for no reason. Speaking of generalizing, how well does this length control carry over to datasets the model hasn't seen? Figure 3 showcases exactly that. L1 handles LSAT, MMLU, and GPQA without skipping a beat, scaling its performance with token usage just like it does on its primary training benchmarks. In fact, it even matches or beats AGENTICA 4K, which doesn't have to worry about length constraints at all. Check out figure 4 next, which zooms in on how precisely L1 matches its target length across multiple datasets. L1's outputs are almost always near the requested token count, something that's a rarity in large language models. Then in figure 5, we see the mean error in generated length. For math tasks, it stays within 3% of the requested length. For out-of-domain tasks, it's within 20 to 40%, which is still much better than letting the model run off on its own. So yeah, L1's not just controlling length in tasks it knows, it's taking that skill with it wherever it goes. Next up, let's talk about how L1 actually performs once it's controlling length so well. In Table 1, you'll find a direct comparison of L1 to other models on math benchmarks. You can see that L1 max, which has more flexible constraints, consistently beats the non-reasoning baseline and comes pretty close to top-tier models at the same token budget. That's a big deal because it shows it's not just about capping tokens. L1 is also ensuring those tokens are used effectively. Another cool find: L1 models that are trained for long reasoning chains do really well even in short chain of thought settings. In some tests, they even surpass much bigger models like GPT-4o under the same token budget. That suggests it's not the sheer number of tokens that matters, but how well the model uses them. And if you look at figure 6, you'll see how L1 changes what it does with a bigger budget. The keywords it uses shift. With more tokens, L1 throws in more self-correction, context, and finer detail. In smaller budgets, it trims the fluff and goes straight to the point. It's basically customizing its reasoning based on how many tokens it has to work with. Finally, ever wonder if giving a model more tokens just means it'll ramble on about nothing? Not with L1. Look at figure 7 to see how it behaves. At lower token budgets, L1 gets right to the answer, skipping some steps. At higher budgets, it doesn't just add filler, it increases the depth of reasoning. The ratio of thought process to conclusion stays pretty balanced, meaning L1 puts those extra tokens to good use. As for the broader takeaways, the paper wraps up by highlighting how LCPO offers a straightforward way to let models know exactly how many tokens they can use. That alone boosts performance by over 100% relative to older methods, and 20% in absolute accuracy in some tasks. And here's a surprise. Models trained to think in long chains handle short chain of thought questions really well, sometimes better than GPT-4o at the same token count. Overall, LCPO makes length control both precise and easy. By letting models manage their own chains of thought under clear constraints, we can build AI reasoning systems that are efficient, accurate, and adaptable. Thanks for joining us today. Happy exploring!